Welcome back to Tears for Fears. I'm your host, Megan Shoup. You can follow me on Twitter at Megs08DFS. Unfortunately, another week of not seeing my smiling face. That's just because I'm still setting up my desk and office and set after the move. Promise I'll be back in front of the camera next week, but I am super excited to break down week 6 tiers. I'm happy we're back to the classic tiers, and from what I could tell on Twitter, I think most fans feel the same. I think we can find a little more edges there, and I'm looking forward to breaking that down and going tier by tier with you guys here. But first, before we do, be sure to like this episode and of course subscribe to the Mayo Media Network. Also, be sure to check out our sponsors at Run the Sims. They've got plenty of tools like the percentile projections and the rangefinder tool that help us make our tiers decisions. So let's get right into week 6, guys. Before we jump into week 6, let's take a quick look back at week 5. Again, this was a different tiers format, but this was my best lineup, and as you can see, I was very happy with my early start of Brady, Henry, and Devontae Adams. I really thought they were all going to smash, and they all did. Yes, they were high-owned, but they were worth it. But my other high-owned guys in Kyler Murray and Darren Waller were very disappointing. I did play some Jalen Hurts and Dalton Schultz, but I wish I would have played them a lot more because they were very under-owned comparatively, and in their tiers, they scored more points. So I, in hindsight, wish I would have rotated them in more often. And my biggest mistake as we look at the first place team was not getting that exposure to the Chargers. You needed to have Herbert and Mike Williams, who just absolutely went nuclear in the second half. And I had Kareem Hunt, but I really needed the Chargers to run that back. So that's kind of a quick summary of what I did right, what I did wrong, and what was ugly in not playing enough Chargers in week 5. But we learn our lessons and we move on to week 6. One thing I'd like to mention before we go tier by tier is team and game stacks. I know I preach not to force stacks in tiers, but this is one week where I have a couple games that I'm going to stack up in different ways. The first one being the Chargers-Ravens. You've got two of the best quarterbacks in the league. I can see them punching back and forth, and then there's multiple guys in multiple tiers available to us. So I'm going to stack that game up. But the one I'm really going to stack up is the game that has the highest total on the slate, and that's the Chiefs-Washington. As you can see, there's plenty of players available in multiple tiers for that game, and I'm going to be stacking that up in multiple different ways. Listen, this is two of the worst defenses in the league. I really think this is going to go over 60 points. I'm smashing the over, and I'm playing tons of these guys in tiers. In Tier 1, we have Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and Kyler Murray. And I've already talked about 3 of these quarterbacks in 2 of the highest total games. And the Arizona-Cleveland game is actually, I believe, the 3rd highest total on the slate. So I'm going to have some interest in Kyler Murray too. But he's coming off a couple stinkers and not using his legs as much, so I'll have the least amount of exposure to Murray out of these 4, but I can't really fade any of them. So I'll be rotating through them, but listen, I'm not going to overthink this. Patrick Mahomes is still incredibly efficient. It's just not getting talked about because his defense is so terrible. But guess what defense is even worse? The Washington defense. Listen, I'm a diehard Washington fan. This is painful of how unexpectedly bad this defense and secondary is. But I'm going to try to make some money off this pain, and I'm going to play Patrick Mahomes in Tier 1. In Tier 2, we have Austin Eckler, Tyreek Hill, Mike Williams, Devontae Adams, and Christian McCaffrey. And as you can see, Tier 2 is going to be tricky with all these Q tags. It sounds like Christian McCaffrey is 50-50, but none of Christian McCaffrey, Mike Williams, or Tyreek Hill practice Thursday, so we really need to watch practice reports Friday and see their status going into Sunday. So I really can't say I'm going to fade anybody in this tier because we may only be down to 3 or 4 players when it's all said and done. So I'm probably going to rotate through these guys, and you know the games I love, and I'm going to have high exposure to those. But again, I'm not going to overthink it. Tyreek Hill is my favorite play in Tier 2. Listen, Winston and company threw all over Washington last week, and I see a big bounce back for Hill and Mahomes here. So, again, I'm not overthinking it. I'm going to stack it up in the highest total game and play Tyreek Hill in Tier 2. In Tier 3, we have Cooper Kupp, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Aaron Jones, and Nick Chubb. And this tier is a little clear for me. You know, in the earlier tiers, I really only like to play the running backs if they're workhorse running backs and or get a lot of targets. And with Aaron Jones and Nick Chubb, they're basically both in a timeshare. And while they both could get 3 or 4 touchdowns, they'd have to be super efficient to do so. So I'm going to fade the running backs and focus on the receivers. And when I go over to run the Sims, Cooper Kupp has the highest win rate by far. Listen, he hasn't gotten touchdowns the last 2 weeks, but he's still getting the targets. They are still there. So Cooper Kupp is my tier 3 play. But I will say that I very much like Chase and Jefferson as a 1B and C behind Cup. In tier 4, we have DJ Moore, Ezekiel Elliott, Travis Kelce, Terry McLaurin, Jonathan Taylor, and DeAndre Hopkins. And as you can see, we have some Q tags here to pay attention to. Be sure to pay attention to the Arizona situation. They have a couple COVID cases, and just keep an eye on that going into Sunday. But basically, my two main guys, my two core plays are basically going to be Travis Kelce and Terry McLaurin. I'm going to have some exposure to Moore and Elliott and Taylor, and I think I'm going to fade Hopkins just based on these not getting the target share, and I don't know that I see the ceiling game for him. But again, I'm not getting cute here. I'm focusing on the game I love the most, the game that I think is going to shoot out. So Terry McLaurin is my tier 4 play. In tier 5, we have Matthew Stafford, Sam Darnold, Dak Prescott, Taylor Heineke, Aaron Rodgers, and Baker Mayfield. And in these tiers, it's hard to predict what ownership's going to be because it's different from Classic because it's not based off of price. But I really think people are going to go to Stafford and Dak and Rodgers, and they'll be the higher owned plays. And, I'll have some exposure to those guys. I think I'm going to fade Mayfield because I just don't see the volume there. It hasn't been there. And I'm going to focus on my two core plays are going to be the guys that I think are going to have to punch back and forth. And I think that's Sam Darnold against the Vikings and, of course, Taylor Heineke against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. He's going to have to keep up with Mahomes. And the Chiefs' defense is nothing to be afraid of. So in the highest scoring game, yet again, I may sound like a homer, but Taylor Heineke is my tier 5 play. In tier 6, we have Marquise Brown, DeAndre Swift, Antonio Gibson, CeeDee Lamb, Joe Mixon, and Kadarius Toney. And I'm going to make this easy. I'm pretty much fading the bottom 3 players. Listen, it makes me nervous to go have players going up against a Bill Belichick-led defense, so he always finds a way to take out their biggest weapons. So I'm fading Lamb, and with Mixon and Toney, they're both banged up, and in Tony's case, I believe Shepard and Slayton are coming back, so I don't know that he has the opportunity for the ceiling game there. Antonio Gibson, I love in the high total game, though I love the passing side better. So my favorite plays are Marquise Brown and DeAndre Swift. And while I know it's better to attack the Chargers on the ground or through your tight end, I really feel like they're still going to find targets for Brown to get him going. So Marquise Brown is my tier 6 play. In tier 7, we have Kareem Hunt, Mark Andrews, Amari Cooper, Darrell Henderson Jr., Keenan Allen, Robert Woods, Darren Waller, and Cortland Sutton. And to me, there's 2 core plays here and everybody else, and they're both in the same game. And that's, of course, Mark Andrews, because you can attack the Chargers via the tight end, and Keenan Allen in the same game. And listen, I know Mike Williams has been the alpha on that team, but for Keenan Allen, the targets are still there, the air yards are still there, the red zone targets are still there. The targets per route run are still there. That's all still there. And he could blow up at any time too. So, and the Ravens defense does not scare me. So with that said, I love that game still. And Keenan Allen is my tier 7 play. In tier 8, we have Brandon Cooks, Adam Thielen, Josh Jacobs, Chase Edmonds, Jacoby Myers, Henry Ruggs III, James Conner, and Allen Robinson. And in this tier, I'm pretty much going to be fading the running backs and focusing on most of the receivers because I just think they have the higher ceiling here. And my 4 core plays are Brandon Cooks, Adam Thielen, Jacoby Myers, and Allen Robinson. For Robinson and Thielen, they're coming off some down weeks, and I think they're going to come at very low ownership. Thielen's usually in a much higher tier, so you're getting a discount on that as well. And with Myers, he still gets the most targets on his team and is, as we all heard this week, due for some positive touchdown regression. But my favorite play in this tier is Brandon Cooks. Last week he didn't get the touchdowns on his team, but I easily think it could go back to him, and I like this matchup for him. So Brandon Cooks is my tier 8 play. So as you can see, I got some exposure to my favorite games and the highest total games. I also went with a lot of players who had a high win rate on Run the Sims. And I went for some ownership leverage on not going with a big name quarterback in tier 5. And I do think people are going to shy away from Marquise Brown in tier 6 with Chargers shutting down receivers. So kind of like my combination of exposure to high total games, looking for the ceiling plays on Run the Sims, and looking for some ownership leverage. So how do you think I did? Let me know in the comments and let me know your favorite core plays and stacks. So that'll do it for this week's Tears for Fears. Be sure to check out Run the Sims. And of course, before you get out of here, like this episode and subscribe to the Mayo Media Network. Now let's go make some money, and I'll see you back here next week.